Okay, sorry about the brief interruption. I'm gonna try to get back at the presentation. But we were just finishing up talking about the crop budget analyzer tool and how this can be used to help determine the opportunity and profitability for all different types of crop production. Kind of focusing on grain with this talk, but there are other tabs on the bottom to help with the other crops that we may want to grow as well. So some of the information that you'll need before you sit down to work through this, you will need some of the fertilizer prices or maybe costs of applying manure and such. So you can get a good baseline on what the fertility is going to cost for the upcoming year. And also some of the other inputs, whether it's uh, herbicides or passes across the field, custom rates, what the cost is for your own time and equipment. So just trying to get those as close to accurate as possible will help make the results then be as accurate as possible. All right, so there maybe are some more selections to be made yet when it comes to corn hybrids or soybean varieties for the upcoming year. Just would like to introduce you to a couple of resources that I think could really be valuable when you're making some of those choices. And these are the variety trials for UW Wisconsin. And these are updated every year. Our soybean variety trial is done by our soybean and small grain specialist, Dr. Sean Conley. Our corn um, hybrid trials are completed by our corn agronomist, Dr. Joe Lauer. One point that we found over the years, of selecting and or not selecting, excuse me, looking at these hybrids and varieties and comparing them in the trials is that oftentimes in corn there is 70 bushels plus or minus just by that choice in variety. Soybeans there can be 25 bushels plus or minus. So hopefully that's a little bit of encouragement to you to dig in and look at the information that's in these reports. They are available at the link that I have below, or definitely let me know if I can help share some of this with you. More than willing to print out a little bit of information if that's the way you would like to receive it. They're split by different parts of the state, and then different maturity lengths and different day lengths for the different crops here that we have. Also, what's interesting on the soybean side is there is a disease rating that's given for white mold. So that's a pretty important tool when we're trying to select for certain fields on our farms. But take a look. These also have information going back years past. You may not have a variety that you're looking at this year in this year's trial, but there's a good chance that it was maybe in a trial within the last 2 to 3 years, which will still make that a pretty relevant data piece for selecting the varieties for your farm. And I wanted to share as well when we're making that seed selection and the traits that come along with that, whether it's a herbicide trait with selecting a soybean variety, or whether it is a BT trait when we're selecting a corn variety, that really does set up our pest management program for the upcoming year. So take a little bit of time to study the traits of the varieties that you're looking at. Make sure that you have the traits in there that you're going to use, and if you're not going to use them, or if your field is not at risk of certain pests, I would suggest trying to leave those traits out. We are having issues. I think we see it mostly uh, in weeds and weed management on our farms where we're just needing to use different types of chemistry, and we're struggling to kill some of the weeds that are in our fields. Well, we're going to have those same types, or we have those same types of concerns when it comes to both insects and diseases as well. So just because we have access to a trait does not mean we need to use it every year in every field. Take a look at where you're at the largest risk. Definitely in a corn on corn setting, we're going to want to use either a good soil applied insecticide or a corn rootworm trait if we're having issues in that field, or if we're looking at trying to mitigate a risk of maybe a different pest, in that crop rotation that puts us at risk. So this trait table, this is just an excerpt of it. This is updated every year. And this helps you be able to kind of sort through all of the different um, variety trait names and know exactly what those traits are targeting in the field, whether it's an insect pest or whether it's a herbicide tolerance trait. Because once we select that variety, we are set then to only be able to use the herbicides that we can with that variety, and then also target the pests that variety has resistance to or has some type of control to. So hopefully that's a little bit of a way to sort through some of that information and help make that detailed decision moving forward. And just would like to echo just the real importance of choosing the control measures that we need, but then not choosing the ones and keeping those in our back pocket when we don't need those in our fields. Uh, Corn rootworm, for instance, is a pest that is fairly easy to predict. Wherever we're seeing the rootworm beetles the year prior, that's where we can really count on there being rootworm larval feeding the upcoming year. So if we're growing a crop that doesn't have risk to corn rootworm, we can be assured that we're not going to have as much issue in that upcoming year. So use some of those scouting techniques, reach out if you want to learn some more about that, and we can talk through some of those ways to be able to decide which fields we really need to have some of these tools in and which fields we don't. And what is that cost of pesticide resistance? Unfortunately, this is a newer type pigweed that we are starting to find in some of the fields. There are a couple populations in Rock County. There are some in Lafayette and Grant. Have not found this weed statewide necessarily, but there definitely are pockets across the state. So this exact picture was actually taken from Chippewa County. A colleague of mine shared this, but I could also take a picture very similar to this in southern Wisconsin as well. So this is Palmer amaranth. If you take a look, I'm moving my cursor here, but the real long, thick seed head, that's a female Palmer amaranth plant. So it's in the pigweed family, similar to redroot pigweed and water hemp, although it has characteristics more similar to water hemp. But there's male and female plants, so it's a dioecious weed, meaning that genetic diversity can really increase quickly across the field. So if we do have plants that we're not able to control and they go to seed, that can be a real risk of spreading that seed across our field and into other fields and farms. So let's make sure we're doing that identification, that we know what the weeds are and what that risk is in our fields for the upcoming year. A weed like this, we really need to limit seed production. That may mean going out midsummer and removing some of those female plants before the seed becomes viable. If nothing else, when we're harvesting, to try to harvest around those areas and not mix that seed in across the entire field. Then also just practice some good hygiene between fields. There's about a 30-minute step-by-step process that I can share for how to get your combine cleaned out and remove upwards of 85% of the weed seeds. So a little bit of time now will really help us so that this weed does not spread. Like I said, it's similar to water hemp, so it has that same risk of being able to spread across our farms and fields. Okay, some on soil fertility, and that's what most of your day will be about. But I like to think about our soil nutrient additions to our fields according to the Liebig's barrel principle, excuse me. So the law of the minimum. If you take a look at that barrel, we're going to reach our yield potential at the lowest stave. All right, so if it's water, we could put other things in there. This is a lot of different nutrients, but maybe it's weed control, maybe it's planting timing, maybe it's varietal choice. All of those different agronomic decisions can be one of these staves in the barrel. So it's important to have that, have that realistic expectation of what our yield goal is, and then to try to balance all of our inputs based off of that. Realizing that just because we put on extra nitrogen fertilizer or put on maybe some type of a micronutrient, that does not mean that we're going to have that profitable return on the other side. The graph on the right, and I know Kevin and Jordan will talk about that more, gives us that reminder of trying to match up our soil pH ratings with our with that widest bar of all our different nutrients. That's when those are most available for nutrient cycling within our soil, and then they can be taken up by our growing crop plant. So we really recommend that 6 to 7 pH, and then if we're planting a legume, especially one that's susceptible to pH, we want to be on the upper side. And if we're not, we can probably be in that 6 to 6.5 and be okay with most crops. Okay, so this is all these nutrient recommendations are available for you, and that's what you're hopefully going to sign up and renew your farms with, is the Snap Plus nutrient management software. This really is a tool to help ensure profitability on our farms, but then also have that way to keep track and know where our nutrients are going, be able to credit the nutrients that are on our farms already, and then be able to have that confidence that we're making a positive impact on our local environments and communities and water quality, because that's the kind of information that's built into this software tool. So all of the recommendations and nutrient guidelines are in A2809 is the name of the document, and that's updated as new data comes in. So that really is the go-to when it comes to trying to make a nutrient management or a soil fertility decision for our farmland. So I just would encourage you to ask, your retailers or other agronomists that are helping you make those decisions, and ask them if they're using guidance from A2809. That really is the standard for profitable crop production in the state of Wisconsin, and that same data set is built into the Snap Plus program. Okay, so these aren't two separate things. Profitable soil fertility planning and nutrient management planning go hand in hand. They're the exact same thing. It's just when we're using that software program, it gives us a much better way to keep track of the ins and outs of our farming system, so we can take full advantage of all those credits that are within our crop rotation. Okay, and with that, we have a few tools. I just wanted to highlight those. One is our corn N rate calculator. So Wisconsin is part of other Midwest states that use MRTN, so maximum return to nitrogen, as the means for selecting a profitable and an environmentally sustainable nitrogen rate for corn production. So there's an app here for either an iPhone or a Android phone, where you can put in the information, put in fertilizer price, put in the price of corn, put in the soil type, and you'll receive that nitrogen rate, which we need for the upcoming year. Then make sure then we also keep track of any credits, whether there's manure that's applied or legume credit from previous years. Those then will be subtracted off of the rate that comes out of this calculator. So again, a tool, but also a tool that's built right into that Snap Plus program. But this is a way for us to just kind of take a snapshot at one part of soil fertility planning. And here is another tool if we want to try to keep track of the legume credits or the manure credits that we have on our farm. These are some ways to take a snapshot of those different parts of that fertility planning. Again, this is all built into the Snap Plus tool. But these are also available for download. If you want to take a look at trying to better understand where are these recommendations coming from for a legume credit and for a manure nutrient credit for our fields. Okay, a little bit of specific information here that I wanted to share. This is 4 years worth of data from one of the nitrogen rate trials. I say one of the trials because there's multiple cooperators, but all that data was aggregated and put back together. So we had more power of site years and fields and soil types. And you can see there's a multitude of different types of crops. Corn and soybean are the two largest, but there's some other crops that were grown as well. In that second column, we take a look at the soil yield potential, which I kind of shared towards the beginning of the talk. We really need to keep a realistic soil yield goal in mind. We want to fertilize for that yield goal, have some history based on that, and then be able to have goals that move higher as our hybrids allow us to, maybe as the weather allows us to, and then we can really target our nutrient applications based off of those different potentials of yield, to give us that profit, that space between profitability and environmental stewardship. So most of these soils were either high or medium yield potential soils. That is listed for every soil type in the state of Wisconsin in the A2809 guide. And then finally, there were some different types of manure products that were used as fertilizers as well, with the nitrogen rate then subtracted from the nitrogen rate. And let's take a look. What is that EONR? So that economically optimum nitrogen return. So that's when we're getting a nice yield increase when we're adding an additional pound of nitrogen, either fertilizer or nitrogen through manure or legume credit. And really what that data set showed us is that there is not always a relationship between yield and nitrogen rate. Okay, and this kind of scattered chart kind of shows that. So what this is saying is there's a lot going on in our soils. A healthy, high organic matter soil, that we have some good soil management techniques. Maybe we're doing some limited tillage and really allowing that soil to hold water and to cycle nutrients. We may not need a lot of nitrogen to still have high yield potential for that cropping field. So somewhere in all this scattered chart here is maybe one of your fields or one of your crops. So one of the take homes from this information, hopefully from some information you're learning in future talks, is that trying to learn what is the optimum nitrogen rate for our own farm and our own crop rotation is really valuable. For instance, if we can obtain a yield of corn of 225 bushel just by what the soil provides, that is extremely profitable, and also it puts us in a very good spot of reducing the risk of nitrogen loss through nitrate to water, and those sorts of risks as well. Whereas on the other hand, if it's taking us 250 units of nitrogen to produce 200 units of corn, maybe we need to look at that system. Excuse me. Can we include a few more crops? Can we use cover crops, or can we do some soil management techniques? What are some things we can work on in those fields so we can reduce the amount of nitrogen that we need, but keep a good strong corn yield goal at the same time. Okay, a few more here, then we'll get wrapped up with this part. Value of on-farm nutrients. So there's a few different tools that are available. The table 9.4 on the left-hand side of the screen, that is out of A2809. So that'll be some book type information that you can use. And then also a colleague Richard Holupka from Clark County put together this spreadsheet to kind of compare manure value with fertilizer value. This is available at that long website that I have on the screen, or I can definitely send this and share this by email as well if you want to play around with this some. So this really helps us understand, how valuable is the manure that we have that we're putting back out in the fields, and can this help us understand how to credit that correctly for crop production. Okay, that actually is the last slide. So we tried to review the weather outlook to be ready for the upcoming year, the ag sector economic situation. Hopefully we talked through that a little bit. You have a little bit better understanding of maybe what we're seeing in the upcoming year. Crop production yield and profit goals, really trying to balance what is that realistic yield for certain acres and certain fields, and how can we match up the inputs on those to be as profitable as possible. Realizing when we're selecting seeds and the traits that come with those, that we also are selecting a pest management strategy for the upcoming year. So, knowing what the risks are in our fields and having the right tools in that seed technology is really important. Balancing soil fertility decisions, trying to keep as much risk out of our nutrient application and our soil loss through our soil management practices is really important, both to the bottom line this year, but also to the health of our communities and the health of our farms in the future. And then what is that risk of that soil and nutrient loss on your own farm? You'll talk about that a little bit more getting into the next talks and understanding more about using a Snap Plus tool. It can be a really important tool to also show some of that risk and how we can manage our soils a little bit more appropriately to keep profitability in mind, but also to limit the environmental risk that we can have on some of our farms. A little bit of a advertisement, I guess I'll say. I do like to follow Eric Snodgrass. He's a climatologist out of University of Illinois. He does some work for Nutrient Ag Solutions. So if you do like getting a weekly weather update, I would suggest that you look for that and try to get connected. That's some really good information that Eric shares every week. And with that, a little bit of fun here on the farm, a picture of myself and my nephews and my dog. We were doing what all boys love, and that is playing in the water. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of excitement for the upcoming year, realizing that there is a lot of risk again this year in crop production, but ultimately, managing the land is a really important responsibility that we all have. And I want you to know that myself and my colleagues in the extension are here to try to help and support as much as possible. Thank you for your attention.